The lab was a sea of soft hums and blinking lights, a symphony of high-tech precision. In the center of it all stood Dr. Alina Kader, her eyes fixed on the holographic projection of quantum fluctuations that danced like ripples in a pond. The image was mesmerizing, a live rendering of vacuum energy interactions pulled from the data collected by the newly developed quantum anomaly mapper. For years, physicists had theorized about the potential of quantum foam, the ephemeral bubbling sea of particles and antiparticles that formed the very fabric of spacetime. Alina's team had just taken a monumental step toward understanding it. "Alina, you need to see this," called Dr. Rami Iskander, her colleague and a renowned historian of ancient mathematics. His voice carried the urgency of discovery. Alina turned, her curiosity piqued. Rami was hunched over his workstation, his hands hovering above a tablet displaying an ancient papyrus. It was one of the many artifacts her team had scanned from the archives of the Cairo Museum, pieces they'd considered irrelevant until now. "What is it?" Alina asked, stepping closer. Rami gestured to the hologram floating above his desk. It was a digital reconstruction of hieroglyphs carved into an ancient stone tablet. The symbols were familiar. The wavy lines representing water, often associated with the primordial waters of Nun in Egyptian mythology. But there was something unusual about these carvings. "Look closely at the wavy lines," Rami said, enlarging the image. "Do you see the subtle variations in their curvature? They're not just artistic flourishes. They're equations." Alina squinted, her analytical mind already racing. The undulations of the lines were indeed precise, their oscillations corresponding to mathematical patterns she'd seen before, patterns that described quantum fluctuations. "You're saying," Alina began, her voice trailing off as the implication struck her. "I'm saying the Egyptians understood quantum foam," Rami finished. "They might not have called it that, but these symbols, these equations, suggest they knew how to manipulate it." Alina's breath caught in her throat. "Are you suggesting they could create and destroy matter?" Rami nodded. "Not just suggesting. Look at this passage." He scrolled to another part of the papyrus, where hieroglyphs described the act of waking Nun, a poetic phrase that had long been interpreted as mythological. But when paired with the equations, the text seemed to describe a physical process. They were describing energy manipulation at the most fundamental level, Rami said. Alina felt the weight of the revelation settle over her. If the ancient Egyptians had indeed unlocked the secrets of quantum foam, it would upend everything humanity thought it knew about history, physics, and the origins of technology. "Do we have the original artifact here?" Alina asked, her voice trembling with a mix of excitement and trepidation. Rami shook his head. "It's in Cairo, but we have high-resolution scans of every inch." "Let's run a comparative analysis," Alina said, moving back to her workstation. "Overlay the hieroglyphs onto our quantum fluctuation models. Let's see if they align." Within moments, the two scientists were immersed in their work, their fingers flying across interfaces as they fed data into the lab's supercomputers. The room filled with the rhythmic clicking of keys and the occasional beep of confirmation. When the results finally appeared, they were staggering. The hieroglyphic patterns matched the quantum foam models with an accuracy that defied coincidence. "This isn't just theoretical," Alina murmured. "They weren't just observing, they were controlling it." Rami leaned back in his chair, his face pale. "Alina, do you realize what this means? If we can decode the full extent of their knowledge, we could reshape reality," Alina finished, her mind spinning with the possibilities. But her excitement was tempered by a creeping unease. Ancient Egyptian texts often spoke of balance and chaos, creation and destruction. If they had wielded this power, what had they used it for? And why had the knowledge been lost? "I think we're missing something," Alina said. "Something crucial. The Egyptians were meticulous record keepers. If they had a protocol for manipulating this energy, there must be more detailed instructions somewhere." Rami nodded. The texts often mention the priests of Nun as the custodians of this knowledge. Maybe there are clues in the temples dedicated to Nun. Alina's gaze sharpened. "The Temple of Khnum at Elephantine," she said. "It's one of the oldest sites associated with the primordial waters. If there's a hidden archive, it might be there." Rami hesitated. "You're suggesting we go to Elephantine?" "Yes," Alina said firmly. "We need to see the site in person. Scans and photographs won't capture the full context." 2 days later, Alina and Rami stood beneath the blazing Egyptian sun, the shimmering Nile stretching out before them. The island of Elephantine was a serene contrast to the chaos of modern life, its ancient ruins whispering secrets of a bygone era. The Temple of Khnum was modest compared to the grand monuments of Luxor or Giza, but its significance was profound. Alina ran her fingers over the weathered stone, her eyes scanning for any sign of the equations they'd discovered. "Over here," Rami called, his voice echoing through the ruins. Alina hurried to his side, where he was crouched before a partially buried relief. The carvings were faint but discernible, more wavy lines interspersed with symbols that seemed to depict tools or devices. "These look like schematics," Rami said, tracing the outlines with a finger. Alina snapped photos and uploaded them to the lab's server for analysis. If these are instructions, they might explain how the Egyptians accessed and manipulated the quantum foam. But as they continued their exploration, a sense of foreboding began to grow. Many of the inscriptions spoke of the veil, a barrier that separated the mortal realm from the chaos of Nun. Breaking the veil was described as both a miracle and a curse, a power that could bring unimaginable prosperity or catastrophic destruction. "Alina," Rami said, his voice tight with concern. "What if the Egyptians stopped using this knowledge because it was too dangerous?" Alina met his gaze, her mind racing. "If that's true, then we need to be even more careful. But we can't stop now. If we don't understand it, someone else might. And they might not be as cautious." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the temple, Alina and Rami uncovered a sealed chamber hidden beneath the ruins. The air inside was thick with the scent of ancient stone, and the flickering beams of their flashlights revealed walls covered in carvings. In the center of the chamber stood a pedestal, upon which rested a small, intricately carved box. Alina's heart pounded as she reached for it, her fingers trembling. "Wait," Rami said, grabbing her arm. "What if it's a trap?" Alina hesitated, her instincts screaming at her to proceed with caution. But the pull of discovery was too strong. Slowly, she lifted the lid of the box, revealing a set of thin, translucent sheets etched with symbols that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. "These aren't papyrus," Alina whispered. "There's something else." Rami leaned closer, his eyes wide. "It's some kind of advanced material. This could be the key to everything." But as they examined the sheets, the ground beneath them began to tremble. A low, resonant hum filled the chamber, growing louder with each passing second. "We need to get out of here," Rami said, his voice rising in panic. Alina clutched the sheets to her chest as they sprinted for the exit. Behind them, the chamber collapsed, sending a plume of dust and debris into the air. Back in the safety of their lab, Alina spread the sheets on a light table, her hands still shaking. The symbols were more complex than anything they'd encountered, their meanings tantalizingly out of reach. "We'll need months, maybe years, to decode this," Rami said, his voice tinged with awe. Alina nodded, her gaze fixed on the glowing symbols. "Whatever this is, it's not just knowledge. It's power. And if the Egyptians called it the veil, it might be because it's the thin line between creation and annihilation." And somewhere deep in the recesses of her mind, Alina couldn't shake the feeling that they had just awakened something that should have remained asleep. The glow of the symbols on the translucent sheets seemed to pulse faintly, almost as if they were alive, reacting to the ambient energy in the lab. Alina stared at them, mesmerized and uneasy. It wasn't just the beauty of the discovery that captivated her, it was the growing sense that the sheets were more than records of knowledge. They were tools, perhaps even active devices. Rami broke the silence. "These symbols, look at this one here." He pointed to a series of intersecting lines that spiraled outward. "It's almost identical to the fluctuation patterns we've been studying in quantum foam. But this part," he traced a smaller curve inside the spiral. "It looks like an amplification pathway." "Amplification?" Alina asked, leaning in. Rami nodded. "Imagine a way to channel quantum fluctuations, to stabilize them, and then scale them up into something usable. Like a controlled explosion of energy at the subatomic level, directed wherever you want it to go." Alina felt a chill crawl up her spine. "That's not just creating matter or energy," she said softly. "That's manipulating the fundamental forces of the universe. If this works, it could change everything." Rami hesitated, his eyes scanning the glowing symbols. "Or destroy everything." "Alina, the Egyptians weren't reckless. They must have had a reason to abandon this." Alina nodded, but her curiosity outweighed her fear. "We have safeguards they couldn't have imagined. If we proceed cautiously, we can learn to use this responsibly." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of analysis and experimentation. Alina's lab team, sworn to secrecy, worked tirelessly to decode the symbols and integrate their principles into modern quantum mechanics. The equations, when translated, described phenomena that modern science had only begun to theorize about. stabilized wormholes, energy extraction from vacuum fluctuations, and even the theoretical creation of entirely new particles. But progress came at a cost. Strange anomalies began to occur in the lab. Equipment would flicker or malfunction for no apparent reason. Sensors that monitored quantum interactions picked up inexplicable spikes, brief moments when reality itself seemed to warp. At first, the team dismissed these as artifacts of their experiments. But as the phenomena grew more frequent and intense, tension mounted. One night, Alina stayed late, determined to test a small-scale application of the Nun Protocol. Using the decoded instructions from the sheets, she had constructed a prototype device, an intricate array of superconductors, lasers, and magnetic fields designed to manipulate quantum foam in a controlled environment. She called it the Veil Interface. Just a small test, she muttered to herself, her voice the only sound in the quiet lab. She activated the interface, her eyes fixed on the display screen, as it began to map the quantum foam in real time. At first, nothing happened. Then, the screen lit up with patterns so intricate and dynamic they seemed alive. The fluctuations aligned, forming a coherent structure that shimmered with an otherworldly light. Alina held her breath as the air around her grew heavy, charged with a palpable energy. Suddenly, a shape began to form in the containment field of the interface. It was small at first, a swirling mass of particles that coalesced into a shimmering, translucent orb. Alina stared in awe. It wasn't just an energy manifestation, it was matter, created from the quantum foam. But her awe quickly turned to horror as the orb began to destabilize. The containment field flickered, and the orb emitted a high-pitched whine that grew louder by the second. Alina scrambled to shut down the interface, her fingers fumbling with the controls. The orb collapsed in on itself with a blinding flash, releasing a shockwave that knocked Alina off her feet. When she regained her senses, the lab was in chaos. Equipment was scattered, lights flickered, and a low hum resonated through the air. But the most chilling change was the faint, unnatural silence that followed. It felt wrong, as if something fundamental had shifted in the fabric of reality. Rami arrived minutes later, his face pale. "Alina, what happened?" he demanded, helping her to her feet. I tried a small-scale test," she admitted, her voice shaking. "I didn't think it would escalate so quickly." Rami looked around the lab, his expression grim. "This isn't just about creating matter, Alina. This is about balance." The Egyptians understood that. They didn't just abandon this knowledge, they sealed it away for a reason. "But we can't stop now," Alina insisted, her voice filled with desperation. "We're so close to understanding. We just need to refine the process, stabilize it." Rami shook his head. "You don't understand. It's not just a technical challenge. The texts warned about the veil. They described it as a boundary, a delicate barrier between order and chaos. If we keep pushing, we might tear that barrier apart." Alina hesitated, her mind racing. She knew Rami was right, but the allure of the knowledge was intoxicating. The power to manipulate reality itself was within their grasp. Could they really walk away from it now? Before she could respond, the lab's sensors began to blare, their alarms filling the room. The display screens flickered to life, showing erratic spikes in the quantum foam. Something was happening, something they hadn't triggered. "It's not us," Alina said, her voice barely a whisper. "Something else is interfering." The symbols on the translucent sheets began to glow brighter, their patterns shifting as if reacting to the disturbance. Alina and Rami exchanged a terrified glance. "What did we wake up?" Rami asked. And in that moment, they both realized the truth. The Nun Protocol wasn't just a guide to manipulating quantum foam. It was a warning, a message from an ancient civilization that had glimpsed the edge of the veil and turned back. But now, the veil had been disturbed. And whatever lay beyond it was beginning to stir. The alarms wailed louder, and the screens around the lab began to glitch, displaying patterns that didn't match anything in their datasets. The air seemed to ripple, as if reality itself was struggling to remain intact. Alina gripped the edge of a workstation, her knuckles white. "Shut it down!" Rami yelled over the cacophony. "I'm trying." Alina shouted back, frantically typing commands into the interface. But the system wasn't responding. The symbols on the translucent sheets glowed brighter, casting an eerie blue light across the lab. It was as if the sheets had become a conduit, feeding energy into the room. The orb of matter that Alina had created earlier wasn't gone, it had reformed. Hovering above the shattered remains of the containment field, it pulsed rhythmically, its surface shifting and swirling with an unnatural iridescence. But now it wasn't alone. Smaller, fainter orbs were beginning to appear, popping into existence like embers catching fire. Rami grabbed Alina's arm, pulling her away from the interface. This isn't a system glitch, it's the protocol. It's reacting to something external. What could be external to quantum foam? Alina asked, her voice trembling. Nothing should exist outside of it, it's the foundation of everything. Rami's face was grim. Unless the Egyptians weren't just describing the foam. What if they discovered something that lives within it? Alina's heart sank. The ancient texts had spoken of the chaos within Nun, often interpreted as poetic metaphors for the primordial void. But now she realized they might have been literal. What are we dealing with? She whispered. The largest orb suddenly expanded, releasing a shockwave that sent equipment flying. From within the shimmering surface, a form began to emerge, a vaguely humanoid shape, its body composed of shifting, translucent matter. It was beautiful and terrifying, its presence filling the lab with a palpable sense of unease. The figure tilted its head, as if studying them. Its eyes, if they could be called that, glowed with a cold, alien light. Then it spoke not with words, but with a resonant vibration that echoed in their minds. You have disturbed the veil. Alina and Rami froze, their breath caught in their throats. The being's presence felt overwhelming, like standing at the edge of an abyss. We didn't mean to, Alina began, her voice shaking. But the being's presence surged, silencing her. Intent is irrelevant. You have awakened what must remain dormant. Rami stepped forward, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. We didn't know. We were trying to understand, to learn. Please, tell us what we've done. The being's form shifted, its outline flickering. The veil is the boundary. It separates creation from uncreation. Your kind walks upon it, but does not see it. To manipulate it is to invite collapse. Alina's mind raced. But the Egyptians, your creators, they understood. They left this knowledge behind. Why? The being's glow dimmed, as if its attention was elsewhere. For a moment it seemed almost mournful. They were not our creators. They were the first to hear the whispers. They learned to shape the foam, to bend the veil. But in their hubris, they invited what lies beyond. They sealed it away and vowed never to return. What lies beyond? Rami asked cautiously. The being's form wavered, its energy flickering. We are fragments, echoes of the chaos that preceded form. Beyond the veil lies the unmaking. To disturb the balance is to invite annihilation. Alina felt a cold dread seep into her bones. The Egyptians hadn't abandoned the Nun Protocol because they'd mastered it, they had stopped because they'd seen the cost. The orbs around the room began to pulse in unison, their rhythm accelerating. The being turned its gaze to them again. Your actions have weakened the boundary. The chaos stirs. It must not awaken. Rami exchanged a desperate look with Alina. How do we stop it? The being's outline grew faint, as if it were struggling to remain tethered to their reality. The knowledge you hold is the key. The protocol must be reversed. You must seal the veil. But how? Alina asked. The texts don't say anything about reversing it. The being's form flickered one last time. The knowledge is incomplete because it was never meant to be used. Your kind must choose, restore the balance or perish. With that, the being dissolved into a cascade of glowing particles, leaving the lab in an eerie silence. The orbs dimmed but didn't vanish, their presence a constant reminder of the growing instability. Rami broke the silence. We have to figure out how to reverse this. If the Egyptians did it once, we can do it again. Alina nodded, her mind already racing. We need to go back to the temple. There must be more inscriptions, more clues. The answers have to be there. But even as she spoke, she felt the weight of the being's warning. They were tampering with forces they barely understood, forces that could unravel the very fabric of reality. And the deeper they delved into the mysteries of the Nun Protocol, the more they risked awakening the chaos that lay beyond the veil. Time was running out, and the fate of their world hung in the balance. Alina and Rami wasted no time. With the translucent sheets packed carefully into a secure case, they boarded the next flight to Aswan, determined to uncover the remaining secrets hidden in the ancient ruins of the Temple of Khnum on Elephantine Island. The journey was tense, each passing hour a reminder that the veil was fraying, its instability rippling through the fabric of reality. Reports of unusual phenomena began to surface worldwide. Sudden bursts of light in the sky, strange gravitational distortions, and most disturbingly, a faint but constant hum that people claimed they could hear deep in their minds. We're running out of time, Rami muttered as the plane descended. The veil is collapsing faster than we expected. Alina nodded, her resolve hardening. Then we have to move quickly. If the answers are there, we'll find them. The temple ruins were quiet under the moonlight, the ancient stones casting long shadows across the sand. Alina and Rami moved carefully, guided by their flashlights and the urgency of their mission. The artifacts and carvings they had studied in the lab had led them to believe there was another hidden chamber, one that contained the full extent of the Egyptians' knowledge about the veil. "This is it," Rami said, pointing to a weathered relief that depicted priests standing before a shimmering barrier. The hieroglyphs surrounding it described the seal of Nun, a ritual to stabilize the veil and return the chaos to its dormant state. Alina traced the carvings with her fingers, her heart pounding. "It's not just a ritual. Look at the detail, they're describing a device. Something that interacts directly with the quantum foam." Together, they worked to decipher the instructions, their years of combined expertise in physics and ancient texts guiding them. The hieroglyphs spoke of three key elements: a source of immense energy, a harmonic frequency to resonate with the veil, and a conduit to channel the chaos back into balance. "This isn't just theory," Alina said. "We can replicate this with the tech we have in the lab." "But there's a catch," Rami said, pointing to a passage that showed a priest standing at the center of the device. "The seal requires a living being to act as the stabilizer. It's not just a machine, it's a connection between the physical and the quantum." Alina felt a lump form in her throat. A sacrifice. Back in the lab, they worked tirelessly to build the device, using the decoded hieroglyphs as their blueprint. It was a monumental task, assembling ancient principles with modern technology, but desperation drove them. The orbs of chaos had grown larger and more unstable, their influence spreading beyond the lab. The faint hum had become a deafening roar, and the anomalies were no longer isolated. When the device was complete, it stood in the center of the lab, an imposing structure of concentric rings and glowing conduits. At its core was a chamber designed to hold the stabilizer, a single person who would merge their energy with the quantum foam to restore balance. "This will work," Alina said, her voice trembling with conviction. "It has to." Rami's face was pale as he placed a hand on her shoulder. "You know what this means, don't you?" Alina nodded, her eyes fixed on the glowing chamber. "If someone doesn't go in, the veil will collapse completely. The chaos will consume everything." "I'll do it," Rami said firmly. "This was my idea, my push to explore the texts. If anyone should take responsibility, it's me." "No," Alina said, her voice breaking. "I brought us here. I activated the protocol. It has to be me." They argued, their words filled with both love and despair, but time was running out. The orbs were growing erratic, their energy threatening to destabilize the entire lab. Finally, Rami relented, tears streaming down his face. "Promise me you'll see it through," Alina said as she stepped into the chamber. "No matter what happens, finish it." Rami nodded, his hands shaking as he activated the device. The rings began to spin, emitting a deep hum that resonated with the orbs. Alina felt a strange pull, as if her very essence was being drawn into the machine. The orbs reacted instantly, their chaotic energy converging toward the device. The translucent sheets on the table glowed brighter than ever, their symbols shifting and aligning. Alina felt an overwhelming presence wash over her: chaos, creation, destruction, and balance all at once. The device reached its peak, the spinning rings creating a blinding vortex of light. Alina screamed, her voice merging with the hum, as her consciousness expanded beyond anything she could comprehend. She was no longer just a person, she was part of the veil, the barrier itself. And then, with a final surge of energy, the orbs collapsed, their chaotic light extinguished. The lab fell silent, the hum dissipating into a serene stillness. The translucent sheets crumbled to ash, their purpose fulfilled. Rami stumbled to the chamber, his heart pounding. Inside, he found nothing. Alina was gone, her sacrifice sealing the veil and restoring balance to reality. The world slowly returned to normal. The anomalies ceased, and the faint hum that had plagued humanity vanished. To the outside world, the chaos was nothing more than an unexplained series of natural phenomena. But Rami knew the truth. He dedicated the rest of his life to preserving Alina's legacy, ensuring that the Nun Protocol would never be rediscovered. The device was dismantled, its components scattered across the globe. The ancient secrets were buried once more, their warnings etched into Rami's memory. As he stood at the ruins of the Temple of Knum years later, he whispered a silent prayer to Alina, to the veil, and to the unknowable forces beyond. And far beyond the boundaries of reality, in the silent chaos of the quantum foam, a faint wisp of Alina's essence lingered, a guardian of the balance she had restored.